A few days ago, I had a dream. A wonderful dream about Shrek in the world of Elden Ring. It was so delightful that I did not want to wake from my slumber. That dream stuck with me and inspired me to create this video, in which I will answer the question, can you beat Elden Ring as Shrek? The tools that Shrek used in the movies were quite diverse, but he is most known for being an adept martial artist, for shouting, and for farting. This is why I narrowed down the list of items that I could use to Large Club, Poison Mist, War Cry Ash of War, and the Spiked Kestis. So, without further ado, strap yourselves in and let's get to the video. I created an absolute monstrosity that looks nothing like the perfect specimen that is Shrek, got really sad because of that, and decided to leave my room to touch some grass. Moving on to a short list of essential items that I needed to grab, which were Donkey from Melina, Large Club, Physic Flask, the Spiked Kestis, War Cry Ash of War, Poison Mist, and the small loan of 100,000 runes from the Knights Cavalry and Grail. After that, I grabbed both halves of the Dectus Medallion, as well as Radagon's Sword Seal. With my morning routine done, I went to Liurnia to farm the poor Albinoryx for the dirty chainmail, which took me a solid hour of grinding to get that chest piece, but with it, the look for this build was complete. Feeling happy that I no longer needed to grind for the chest piece, I began grinding for the smithing stones, starting with the bell bearing in Raya Lucaria tunnels, and moving on to the second one in Altus Plateau. 3 hours in, I had all of the upgrades that I needed, and I finally began playing the game. Starting with Margit, who didn't exactly stand a chance with how strong I was at that point. But it did take me quite some time to get used to the War Cry Ash of War though. I'm pretty ashamed to admit this, but Godric provided me with a surprising amount of difficulty this time around. Let's just pretend that it's because I'm not used to this kind of playstyle, and not because I'm ass at the game, okay? Moving on to Runala. Her phase 1 went as usual, beat the kids and then move on to her. But in phase 2 this time around, she was pulling off some insane moves, like dodging most of my charged attacks, spamming her spells more often than usual, and in general, she was far more of a pain in the rear than she usually is for me, but all it took was one mistake on her part, and she was finished.
Little Rani, my dear daughter.
Initially, I wanted to deal with the tree sentinel by poisoning him, but seeing as how slow the whole process was, I decided to simply get it done the usual way. I then dealt with the Spirit of Godfrey, which provided me with some much needed practice for the eventual fight against the real Godfrey. Next up was Morgoth. And I'm gonna be frank with you, I hated every second of this experience. Usually I don't have that much trouble fighting this guy, but this time around, Morgoth nearly broke me. His attacks are really punishing if you get up close, which I had to do for the charged attacks, with which I could poise through his hits occasionally, and with no effective ways to punish him from a distance, besides Poison Mist, which Morgoth usually just dodged out of the way of. The trip to the salt mines became one of the worst ones I've had in a long while. The strategy I resorted to using is stance breaking him and attempting to poison him for the added bit of damage, which in the end proved to be the winning strategy. In the mountaintops, I got the third stone bell bearing, got my weapons upgraded, and moved on to the fire giant. I initially resorted to using the Spiked Kestis for phase 1, the added bit of bleed damage helped me out a lot in that regard. And then I used the large club for phase 2, getting a few staggers here and there. Heavy attacks on Donkey also came in clutch during this phase. That allowed me to stance break the giant for the final time, and put him out of his misery. At least, until I eventually do another challenge run. I then talked to Melina and got to Farum Azula, where I faced off with my most dreaded enemy, the Godskin duo. I value my sanity a lot, and since I set myself a goal of not using summons of any kind this time around, I resorted to using the sleep pods which I found in the Fairy Godmother's factory, and that strategy worked out like a charm. I put both Skinny Pete and Huel to sleep, poisoned them, applied the Ash of War, and went ham on these poor souls. In my previous playthroughs, it took me around 2 hours until I got tired of fighting these two solo, subsequently pulling out my Mimic tier. So getting to beat these guys on my first attempt was probably the most euphoric feeling I've ever had playing this game. Smart usage of the pillars was also quite important, and I've also noticed that while Huel was doing his roll attack, Skinny Pete was just standing there, menacingly, which is definitely nice of him. I had a pretty clear outline on how to approach Malekith this time around. Since Beast Clergyman does a lot of standing around in one spot, I decided to abuse that by getting the Poison Mist to proc, which wasn't exactly an issue, as was the Beast Clergyman phase in general. Where I experienced the most amount of difficulty was with, you guessed it, phase 2. I tried my hardest to set up a riposte to phase 2 during phase 1, which never worked out, as most of the hits I face tanked did a ton of poise damage to my character, and Malekith, just like Renala, dodged some of the heavy attacks here and there, and the windows between hits grew too wide to set up a proper riposte for phase 2. At the end of the day, I managed to beat Malekith with just a sliver of health left and with no flasks whatsoever. Next on the list was gaining access to the Halictri in Mogwin Palace via the Secret Medallion. The first half I got from Albus in the village of the Albinorics, and then moved on to command the Nile, which is a fight I was quite nervous about. To my amazement, Warcry is an incredible tool against the Banished Knights because of the initial startup stagger that this Ash of War has, so the two knights weren't a problem and neither was Nile. This is another example of a fight that usually takes me several attempts to go through, but with these specific tools, I was able to clear it out in one try, which is very neat if you ask me. With the consecrated snowfield open to exploration, I got to Mogwin Palace and saw a bunch of submissive and breedable Albinorics. I'll leave it up to you to guess what they did for the next few hours.
I can't believe I'm gonna be a father!
After some quality time in the Mogwin Palace, I broke Gideon's bones and went up against Godfrey. The spiked Kestis is probably one of the better weapons I've used for phase 1, as when I properly dodge Godfrey's attacks, getting up close to him and punishing him with the boxing gloves is quite nifty. All that is required from the player is to get into this sort of dance with Godfrey for phase 1 to go without a hitch. That is both fun to play and watch, in my opinion. Once I got him down to about 70% health, I pulled out my large club and started setting this bad boy up for a riposte on the 4th heavy attack in phase 2, which went pretty smoothly most of the time. You might ask me why I'm face tanking all of his hits, and I'm just gonna be honest with you by saying that I have no idea how to dodge most of the attacks in phase 2.
I keep having this nagging feeling that I've forgotten something.
Hey, if you forgot it, it probably wasn't all that important.
Yeah, I guess.
While thinking over who would push my shit in the hardest next, Moog or Melania, I looked over at Caelid on the map and had the realization that I completely forgot about Radahn. My overleveled ass rushed over to the boss fight, and I beat him in just under 50 seconds, even almost one-cycling him, which has to be like a world record or something. It's not? Oh, okay. With that slight inconvenience out of the way, I settled on fighting Melania next. Easily dealing with Loretta, I went straight over to Melania's boss room, and she was a tough cookie to crack, not gonna lie.
I am Melania.
Yeah, I know. After quite some time of thinking over how I should even approach her, I decided upon one strategy that could help me. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Shrek. This particular build is not something I feel comfortable with when fighting what is most likely the hardest boss in the game, as you have to get in close to get a hit on her. Regular attacks with the club are slow enough, but the charged attacks take about a few business days to initiate. I decided to forget about the no-hit run on Melania with this build, and went in fully poised, fully armored, fully greased up with the large club's heavy attacks right in her face, while simultaneously face tanking all of the attacks that she would throw at me. Melania doesn't have a lot of poise, thus making it possible to stance break her on the second heavy attack.
Oh shit, I'm sorry.
With an almost foolproof strategy in place, I went into phase 2 with the same mindset. Melania is way more aggressive into second phase though, allowing me to take a back seat and let her come to me while charging up a heavy attack. Also, I have no idea how I survived all of that. And, once again, with a sliver of health left and with no flasks whatsoever, Shrek came out on top. It's mugging time, baby. Before going into the boss fight, I got the physic tier to negate a good chunk of the damage from his nihil attack, and settled on this strategy. Attempt to poison Moog, then go in hand with the boxing gloves, taking as much of his health off as I could with the bleed damage, both in phase 1 and in the phase transition. During phase 2, I had to carefully find openings in his attacks to use my charged heavies to stance break him, and even if this fight took 2 hours of my life away that I'm never going to be able to get back, I made that strategy work and came out on top.
I can see it. As clear as day.
Rykard is a definite no-no. He was pretty much impossible for me to defeat with this build. As it is always the case, phase 1 is a breeze, as the hitbox of the snake is decent enough and I was able to go through phase 1 quite consistently. For some reason Rykard's hitbox in phase 2 is almost impossible to hit consistently, neither with the club nor with the gloves, so I thought to myself, since the boss is heavily incentivized to be defeated with the Serpent Hunter, let's just do it how it's intended, which I did. Now time for the final boss, Prince Charming and Mr. Radagon and the Elden Beast. Radagon was somewhat decent this time around at least. Stance breaking him was a consistent strategy and he was quite forgiving with most of his attacks, thus allowing me to go into the second phase with most of my Crimson Flasks saved up. Elden Beast, on the other hand, was, for lack of a better word, an annoying fuck. The thing is, it should get stance broken after 4 heavy attacks, which it didn't, and it's not like the windows between heavy attacks were wide, but anyways. I finally got the first stance break after what felt like a barrage of heavy attacks, and the length of the animation of the Elden Beast being down also allowed me to sneak in one more heavy attack before riposting it. And the first thing it does after waking up is cast Elden Stars. What else would it do? But little did this amoeba know that I had a special potion brewed up at the Fairy Godmother's factory that made it so the damage I received from Elden Stars actually healed me. And it was that big brain move on my part that actually allowed me to be in the black for a short while, not worrying about Elden Stars. 3rd time's the charm, with no Crimson Flasks and a few hits away from death, I was able to beat the Elden Beast. And Shrek finally ascended and became the Elden Lord.
What are you doing in my swamp?
Yeah, I couldn't resist using this joke. Sorry. Getting out of my comfort zone is something I enjoy doing, and even though this type of build isn't really my cup of tea, I still had a lot of fun playing it. It certainly is among the more complex builds I've had the pleasure of trying out. What with having to manage the stamina and using the best possible windows of attack was certainly lots of fun, and I do hope that you enjoyed this video. If you want to try out a similar build, here are the stats with the talismans. Thank you everybody for watching, have a good one, peace.